My dad loved any excuse to drive. He was devoted to his car, a bronze-colored two-door Buick Electra 225, which he referred to with pride as the deuce and a quarter. He kept it buffed and waxed and was careful about the maintenance schedule, taking it to Sears for tire rotations and oil changes, the same way my mom carted us kids to the pediatrician for checkups. We loved the deuce and a quarter too. It had smooth lines and narrow taillights that made it look cool and futuristic. It was roomy enough to feel like a house. I could practically stand up inside it, running my hands over the cloth-covered ceiling. This was back when wear a seatbelt was not required by law, so most of the time Craig and I just flopped around in the rear, dropping over bodies over the front seat when we wanted to talk to our parents. Half the time I'd pull myself up on the headrest and jut my chin forward so that my face could be next to my dad's and we'd have the exact same view. The car provided another from the closeness for my family a chance to talk and travel at once. In the evening after dinner, Craig and I would sometimes beg my dad to take us out for an aimless drive. As a treat on summer nights, we'd head to a drive-in theater southwest of our neighborhood to watch Planet of the Apes movies, parking the Buck at dusk, and settling in for the show, my mom handing out a dinner of fried chicken and potato chips she'd brought from home. Craig and I eating it on our laps in the back seat, careful to wipe our hands on our napkins and not the seat. It would be years before I fully understood what driving the car meant to my dad. As a kid, I could only sense it, the freedom he felt. He felt behind the wheel, the pleasure he took in having a smooth running engine and perfectly balanced tires humming beneath him. He'd been uh, he'd been in his 30s when a doctor informed him that the odd weakness he'd started to feel in one leg was just the beginning of a long and probably painful slide. The odds were that someday, due to a mysterious disease attacking his brain and spinal cord, he'd find himself unable to walk at all. I don't have a precise dates, but it seems that the Buick came into my dad's life at roughly the same time that multiple scale sclerosis did. And though he never said it, the car had to provide him some sort of sideways relief. The diagnosis was not something he or my mom dwelled upon. We were decades still from a time when a simple Google search would bring up a head spinning array of charts statistics and medical explainers that either gave or took away hope. I debuted he would have wanted to see them in any way. Although my dad was raised in a church, he would have prayed for God to spare him. He wouldn't have looked for alternative treatments or a guru or some filthy genie to blame. In my family, we have a long-standing habit of blocking out bad news, of trying to forget about it almost the moment it arrives. Nobody knew how long my dad had been feeling poorly before he first took himself to the doctor, but my guess is it had already been months, if not years. He didn't like medical appointments. He wasn't interested in complaining. He was a sort of person who accepted what came and just kept moving forward. I do know that on a day of my big piano recital, he was already walking with a slight limp, his left foot unable to catch up to his right. All my memories of my dad include some reminder of his disability, even if none of us were quite willing to call it that yet. What I knew at the time was that my dad moved a bit more slowly than other dads. I sometimes saw him pausing before walking up a flight of stairs, as if needing to think through the maneuver before actually attempting it. When we went shopping at a mall, he'd park himself on a bench, content to watch the bags or sneak in a nap while the rest of my family roamed freely. Riding downtown for the piano recital, I sat in the back seat of the bug wearing a nice dress and patient leather shoes, my hair in pigtails, experiencing the first cold sweat of my life. I was anxious about performing, even though back at home in Robbie's apartment, I'd practiced my song practically to death. Craig too was in a suit and prepared to play his own song, but but the prospect of it wasn't bothering him. He was sound asleep, in fact knocked out, cold in a back seat, his mouth slightly open, his expression blissful and unworried. This was Craig. I spent a lifetime admiring him for his ease. He was playing by then in a Billy basketball league that had games every weekend and apparently had already tamed his nerves around performing. My dad would often pick a lot as close to our destination as possible, shelling out more money for parking to minimize how far he'd have to walk on his unsteady legs. That day we found Roosevelt University with no trouble and made our way up to what seemed like an enormous echoing hall where the recital would take place. I felt tiny inside it. The room had elegant floor to ceiling windows through which you could see the white lawns of Giant Park and beyond that, the white capped swells of Lake Michigan.